The first time I met him, I felt something I couldn't name but couldn't dismiss. Not attraction, not exactly. Something more like the feeling you get at the edge of a high place. A combination of thrill and warning. Your body telling you two contradictory things at once. His name was Ethan. He was introduced to me through mutual friends at a dinner party in the fall, when I was 31 and newly single and convinced I was finally in a place of enough self-awareness to make better choices than I'd made before. That's a dangerous place to be, actually. The place where you're confident you've done the work. Where you're so sure you've learned from your past that you stop staying vigilant. Confidence in your own awareness can become its own kind of blind spot. Ethan was charming in that specific, calibrated way that I now recognize as a skill rather than a quality. He asked questions. He remembered details. He made you feel like you were the most interesting person in any room he was in. I know how this sounds, every story about a person like this starts with this same description. But that's the thing, the warning signs aren't mysterious. They're usually completely recognizable in retrospect. The question is why we miss them, or choose not to see them, in real time. I had a feeling on that first night. We talked for almost 2 hours, and somewhere in the middle of the conversation I had this flash of something, a moment of interior clarity where I thought, this person is performing. I couldn't point to what triggered it. His words were warm, his posture open, his stories compelling. But underneath it all I felt something slightly off. Like a song played in a key that's almost right but not quite. And then I let the feeling pass. I told myself I was being paranoid. That I was projecting patterns from old relationships onto someone new because I hadn't fully healed. I used my self-awareness against myself, if that makes sense. I reframed a genuine signal as a symptom of my own damage. We started dating 3 weeks later. The first few months were extraordinary. I want to be honest about that because I think it matters. These situations don't work if they aren't extraordinary at the beginning. Ethan was attentive and intense and made everything feel significant. He had a way of framing ordinary moments as if they were milestones. The first time I cooked for him. The first time we stayed up all night talking. He annotated everything with meaning, and I was starving for that. I wanted someone to treat my life as important. But around month 4, things began to shift. Subtly at first. Almost imperceptibly. He started making small comments about my friends. Not cruel comments, observations, he'd call them. She seems like she needs a lot of attention from you. He doesn't seem to actually listen when you talk. Each comment was delivered with apparent concern for me, framed as him seeing things I couldn't see because he loved me. I noticed it and I filed it away. Another signal. Another moment of interior discomfort that I chose to rationalize. I told myself he was perceptive. I told myself maybe he was right. By month 7, I had quietly started spending less time with the people he'd identified as problems. I didn't make a decision to do that, it happened gradually, through small accommodations that each seemed reasonable. Canceling plans because Ethan and I had made other plans. Choosing his company over a friend's dinner. Drifting, slowly, from the people who had known me before him. This is what isolation looks like when you're inside it. It doesn't look like isolation. It looks like prioritizing your relationship. It looks like growing up, choosing partnership, investing in someone. The framing is so different from the outside that you genuinely cannot see what's happening. My best friend, the one I'd known since college, the one who had seen me through 3 breakups and a career crisis, told me she was worried. She said, "You seem different. You seem smaller." I defended him. I told her she didn't understand our relationship. I told her she was jealous, which was something Ethan had actually suggested as a possibility, and the fact that I was now using his script against someone who loved me tells you everything about where I was. She went quiet after that. She didn't disappear from my life, but she stepped back. And I let her, because I'd constructed a version of reality in which her concern was the problem. Ethan's control, and I can call it that now, clearly and without hesitation, was masterful in its indirectness. He never told me what to do. He never issued ultimatums. He just consistently, persistently, gently reshaped my perception. He was always the one who truly understood me. Everyone else was somehow lacking in their understanding or their intentions. By the time I was fully inside it, I had lost the external reference points that would have allowed me to see how far I'd drifted. The moment I woke up arrived in the most ordinary way. We were at a grocery store, which somehow makes it worse, that the clarity I'd been avoiding for over a year arrived between the cereal aisle and the produce section. Ethan said something dismissive about a decision I'd made at work, something small, something he'd said variations of 100 times. And I looked at him, and I saw, very clearly, the exhaustion on my own face reflected in the glass of the freezer door. I looked tired in a specific way. Not sleep-deprived tired. Soul tired. And I thought about the woman I had been at that dinner party 14 months ago. The one who had felt the warning and chosen to dismiss it. I thought about every subsequent moment where something in me had flinched, and I had overridden the flinch with a rationalization, and I had walked further in. I left him 4 months later. It took that long because leaving is its own complicated process. When you've been inside something like that, you don't just feel free once you recognize the cage. You've absorbed so much of his framing that you have to work to trust your own perceptions again. Rebuilding that trust in my own instincts, has been the real work of the years since. Here's what I know now about those early signals: they weren't paranoia. They weren't the projection of old wounds. They were my nervous system doing exactly what it's designed to do, receiving information and communicating it to me clearly and directly. I ignored it. Not once, but dozens of times, each time building a stronger case for why the signal was the problem rather than what the signal was pointing to. Our instincts are not infallible. They can be shaped by fear and by past experience. But they deserve to be taken seriously. They deserve to be examined honestly rather than simply overwritten by desire or optimism. The conversation I have with myself now, before any significant decision, is different. When I feel that discomfort, that faint but insistent signal that something is off, I no longer rush to explain it away. I sit with it. I ask it what it's trying to tell me. I've learned that the voice that says something is wrong is not the enemy. It's the most honest thing about you. And it was always on your side. There's a concept in psychology called gaslighting, the process by which someone systematically causes you to doubt your own perceptions. I had heard the word before I met Ethan. I thought I understood what it meant. What I didn't understand, until I was inside it, is how it works on people who are specifically looking for it. The gaslighting I experienced wasn't the dramatic, obvious kind you read about in articles. It wasn't being told things that obviously hadn't happened. It was subtler. It was the consistent, gentle reframing of my perceptions as symptoms of my past rather than accurate readings of the present. Every concern I raised about something he'd done became evidence of my unresolved issues. Every moment of discomfort became an invitation to examine my own patterns rather than his behavior. I was actually primed to receive this. I'd done therapy. I knew about patterns and attachment and the ways we project. And so when Ethan offered me the frame of my own psychology as the explanation for my concern, I was already equipped to accept it. I was already practiced at turning the lens inward. He didn't invent my self-doubt. He redirected it. The process of recovering my own perceptions after leaving him took longer than the relationship itself. Because it wasn't just about recovering trust in my own judgment, it was about distinguishing between the healthy self-examination I developed in therapy and the weaponized version of that same self-examination that had been turned against me. How do you separate legitimate introspection from a pattern someone else installed? Slowly. Carefully. With a lot of professional help and a lot of patience. My best friend, the one I dismissed as jealous, was the first person I called after I left him. She came over immediately. She didn't say I told you so, and I want to say that clearly, because I know she had every right to. She just made tea and sat with me and said, "Your instincts were working the whole time." They were. And the practice of trusting them again, of allowing the signal to be information rather than something to immediately interrogate, has become one of the most important things I've built since. Not perfect trust. I haven't swung to the other extreme of treating every instinct as infallible. But a kind of respectful attention. A practice of sitting with the signal long enough to ask what it might be telling me, rather than immediately explaining it away. Your instincts are not your enemy. They are not your past talking. Sometimes they are simply your present, communicating clearly. Learn to hear the difference. It might be the most important skill you ever develop. I also want to address something that comes up whenever I talk about this experience, the question of whether I should have known better. Whether self-awareness is supposed to be armor. The honest answer is, no. Self-awareness is not armor. And treating it as armor, which is exactly what I was doing, is actually what made me more vulnerable, not less. Here's why: when you believe that you're aware enough to catch manipulation, you lower your guard. You stop checking the signals, because you trust that you'd notice if something were off. You've outsourced your safety to your insight. And insight, particularly when someone is deliberately working around it, is not reliable protection. The people who are genuinely skilled at what Ethan did are very good at identifying and using your self-awareness against you. They know how to offer you the frame of your own psychology as the explanation for your discomfort. They know that if you're the kind of person who does the work, you'll be willing to do more work when the work is pointed inward. They'll make sure it stays pointed inward. What actually helps, what I've learned actually provides some protection, isn't more insight. It's external reality checks. Real relationships with people who knew you before, who will tell you the truth, who will notice when you become quieter or smaller or more defended. My friend. The one I dismissed as jealous. She was the actual protection I had. And I dismantled it exactly when I needed it most. Keep your people close. Not as validation, not to tell you what you want to hear. As reality. As the outside perspective that your inside perspective cannot provide for itself. That's the thing self-awareness cannot do alone. It needs witnesses. Don't cut them out. Even when something, or someone, is making it feel necessary to. Especially then.